Robert Chen sat alone in his large corner office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. As the CEO of Harvest Table, a restaurant chain with over 50 locations across the country, he should have felt proud. The business magazines called him a success story. His bank account agreed, but something was bothering him deeply. The Morning Sun reflected off his Businessman of the Year award as he picked up another customer complaint letter. This one was like all the others that had been piling up lately. Staff seemed annoyed we were even there, felt rushed through our meal, nobody smiled once. He tossed it onto the growing stack on his desk. "Mr. Chen, your 9 o'clock is here," his assistant Jen called through the intercom. "Send them in," he replied, putting on the smile he had perfected over years of business meetings. 3 members of his executive team filed in. They were dressed in matching dark suits, carrying tablets filled with charts and numbers. Tom, his marketing director, started the meeting with talk of increased advertising budgets. Lisa from operations discussed new training programs. Greg from finance showed profit margins that were healthy but not growing as expected. "The numbers are fine," Robert interrupted, surprising everyone. "But something's wrong at our restaurants. Real people, our customers, are unhappy." The room fell silent. No one was used to Robert cutting through the corporate talk. "We've put in new training," Lisa reminded him. "Every employee goes through our customer service program." Robert shook his head. "Yet the complaints keep coming. These aren't just picky customers. Something's missing." He stood up and walked to the whiteboard, picking up a marker. "When I started this company 15 years ago with one small restaurant, I knew every customer by name. I knew my staff's stories. When did we become just another chain where people feel like numbers?" The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. "What if," Robert paused, a wild idea forming. "What if I could see how our restaurants really work? Not as the boss who gets special treatment, but as a regular person. No, even better, as someone the staff might not want to serve." Tom laughed nervously. "Like that TV show? Undercover Boss? Those are all staged, you know." "Not like the show," Robert said. "Something real. No cameras, no reveal at the end. Just me seeing the truth." "That's crazy," Greg said. "You're too well known. Your picture is on our website." Robert turned to the window again. "It's been 5 years since we updated those photos. I'm older, grayer." He rubbed his cleanly shaved face. "What if I didn't look like this?" "You're talking about disguising yourself as what? A food critic?" Lisa asked. "No," Robert said quietly. "As someone homeless. Someone without much money. The kind of customer restaurants often try to move along quickly." The room erupted in protests. It was risky, potentially offensive, definitely unusual. But Robert wasn't listening anymore. He was remembering his own father, who had worked 2 jobs yet always set aside money to take the family out for a special meal once a month. He remembered how some places had treated them, making them wait longer, seating them by the kitchen, rushing them through their rare night out. "I've made up my mind," he finally said. "For the next month, I'm going to visit every one of our locations. Not as Robert Chen, CEO, but as just another person looking for a warm place and a cheap cup of coffee. I want to see who we really are when no one thinks the boss is watching." He dismissed his stunned team, who left whispering among themselves about their eccentric boss. Only Jen, his assistant of 12 years, seemed to understand when he explained his plan more fully. "You've been lost in spreadsheets too long," she said simply. "Maybe this is exactly what you need. But please be careful." The next morning, Robert stood in front of his bathroom mirror with a pair of scissors in his hand. His designer suit hung in the closet. Instead, he wore old jeans and a faded t-shirt he'd found at a thrift store. As he started cutting his carefully styled hair, he wondered if he had finally lost his mind. But something in his gut told him this crazy plan might be the only way to save the soul of his company. The alarm rang at 4:30 a.m., much earlier than Robert usually woke up. For a moment, he forgot about his plan as he reached for the snooze button. Then reality hit him. Today was day 1 of his undercover mission. He shuffled to the bathroom and stared at his reflection. Last night's amateur haircut looked even worse in the morning light. Uneven and choppy. Perfect. He hadn't shaved for 3 days, and dark stubble now covered his normally clean-shaven face. Robert opened the drugstore bag he'd purchased yesterday and pulled out a small kit of theatrical makeup. "Never thought I'd be doing this," he muttered as he dabbed at his face, following the YouTube tutorial he'd watched 5 times last night. He darkened the circles under his eyes, added a weathered look to his skin, and even stained his teeth with a temporary brown tint that tasted horrible but looked convincingly neglected. When he finished, a stranger stared back at him. Gone was Robert Chen, the polished CEO whose face appeared in business magazines. In his place stood a tired-looking man who seemed to have hit hard times. From another shopping bag, he pulled out clothes he'd purchased from a thrift store across town, jeans with worn knees, a faded flannel shirt with a small tear in the elbow, and a jacket that had seen better days. He completed the look with scuffed boots and a knit cap pulled low over his ears despite the warm weather. His luxury apartment felt strange as he moved through it dressed this way. Everything seemed to mock him: the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the French press coffee maker that cost more than what some people made in a week. He grabbed a worn backpack he prepared with a few essentials and some carefully counted small bills and change. No credit cards, no smartphone, just an old flip phone for emergencies. Robert took the service elevator down to avoid the morning crowd in the lobby. The maintenance man, who usually greeted him with a respectful "Good morning, Mr. Chen," looked right through him, eyeing him suspiciously. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his hand hovering near the security phone. "Just heading out," Robert mumbled, hunching his shoulders and shuffling past. The man didn't recognize him at all. The disguise was working. Outside, the morning rush hour was beginning. People in business attire hurried past, clutching coffee cups and checking phones. These were the same streets Robert walked every day, but suddenly everything felt different. No one made eye contact. A woman pulled her purse closer as he passed. A man in a suit similar to ones Robert owned stepped widely around him on the sidewalk. Invisibility and hypervisibility at the same time, Robert thought. People simultaneously didn't want to see him and couldn't help but notice him as a potential threat. He decided to test his disguise one more time. He entered the coffee shop near his office building where he was a regular customer. The barista, who usually started preparing his order the moment he walked in, looked up briefly, then away, expression blank. "Can I help you?" she asked when he approached the counter, her tone professional but cool. "Just a small coffee, please," he said, his voice deliberately rougher than usual. "$2.50, she replied, not offering the loyalty discount she always gave him. Robert dug in his pocket for change, counting it slowly on the counter. The man behind him sighed loudly. The barista's smile tightened. When he received his coffee, not the special blend she usually suggested, Robert took it to a corner table. He watched as business people came and went. 3 separate times, people glanced at his table, then chose to stand rather than sit near him. His own employees passed by, a marketing coordinator, an accountant, his HR director, and not one recognized their boss. By mid-morning, he'd finished his coffee but remained at the table, testing how long he could stay. It took exactly 37 minutes before the manager approached. "Sir, we need this table for paying customers. If you're finished." She let the sentence hang in the air. Robert nodded and shuffled out, noticing how quickly a cleaner wiped down his table and chair. Standing on the sidewalk outside his first Harvest Table location, Robert took a deep breath. If his own staff didn't recognize him, and the world already treated him differently after just a few hours, he was ready for the real test. "Let's see who we really are," he thought, pushing open the door to his own restaurant. Robert pushed open the door to his first Harvest Table restaurant, immediately noticing the warm smell of fresh bread and coffee that he'd always been proud of. The lunch rush hadn't started yet, so only a few tables were occupied. A young hostess looked up from her phone as the bell above the door jingled. Her smile froze when she saw him. Robert watched her eyes quickly scan his worn clothes and unkempt appearance. "Just one?" she asked, her voice higher than normal. "Yes, please," Robert replied, keeping his voice rough. She grabbed a menu and led him toward the back of the restaurant, past at least 15 empty tables with reserved signs suddenly placed on them. Robert knew they weren't actually reserved. It was a tactic he'd never approved, but apparently happened anyway. "Here you go," she said, placing his menu on a wobbly table right next to the swinging kitchen doors and restrooms. Your server will be with you shortly." Robert waited and waited. 15 minutes passed before a waiter approached, despite the restaurant being nearly empty. "What can I get you?" the waiter asked without introducing himself or offering water. "Just coffee for now, please," Robert said, fishing out some change from his pocket. "How much is it?" $3, the waiter said. The menu clearly listed it as $2. Robert said nothing, just counted out the money slowly. The waiter tapped his foot impatiently. "I'll be back with your coffee," he said, already turning away. When the coffee arrived, it was lukewarm and bitter, nothing like the premium brew Harvest Table was known for. Robert suspected it was the bottom of an old pot. He nursed it slowly, watching how other customers who came in after him were treated, with smiles, recommendations, bread baskets, and frequent check-ins. After an hour with just the one coffee, the manager appeared beside his table. "So, we have a 90-minute limit during busy periods," she said with a tight smile. Robert looked around at the half-empty restaurant. "Busy?" he asked. "We have reservations coming in," she replied quickly. "I'll need this table." Robert left, a bitter taste in his mouth that had nothing to do with the coffee. The second restaurant that day was worse. He barely made it past the door when the host stopped him. "We're full," the man said, despite the visible empty tables. "I just want coffee," Robert insisted. After a visible internal struggle, the host seated him at the counter, as far from other customers as possible. The pattern repeated: slow service, overcharging, and cold stares. By his fourth restaurant visit the next day, Robert felt genuinely discouraged. This location was one of his oldest and supposedly best-run establishments. He walked in during mid-afternoon when most restaurants were slow. The host, a woman in her 50s who had worked for Harvest Table for over a decade, looked him up and down. "We're not a shelter," she said quietly. "There's a community center 3 blocks east." "I have money," Robert said, showing a handful of coins. "I just want some soup." She sighed heavily. "Fine, but you'll have to sit there." She pointed to a table literally touching the emergency exit door behind a large plant. "And you need to order right away." The soup arrived quickly. Clearly they wanted him gone. It was lukewarm, like they hadn't bothered to heat it properly. No bread accompanied it, though he could see baskets of it going to other tables. 2 businessmen at a nearby table loudly complained about letting just anybody in while glancing his way. The manager apologized to them and offered free desserts. Robert ate his soup slowly, fighting back real emotion. The words on the wall mocked him. At Harvest Table, everyone is family. The company values printed on every menu, dignity, respect, service, felt like empty promises. As he left his 5th restaurant that day, rain began to fall. Robert stood under the awning, watching customers pull up in nice cars, being greeted warmly by the same staff who had treated him like a nuisance. "This isn't what I built," he thought, a heaviness settling in his chest. This isn't what Harvest Table was supposed to be. Tomorrow he would try one last location, a struggling restaurant in a working-class neighborhood that was actually losing money. His financial team had been pushing to close it for months. Little did Robert know that this final stop would change everything. Morning sunlight struggled through cloudy skies as Robert approached his final test location. This Harvest Table restaurant sat on a corner in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The paint was chipping slightly around the windows, and the sign needed cleaning. His financial team had marked this place for closure months ago due to falling profits. Robert hesitated before entering. After 5 painful rejections, he wasn't sure he could handle another. His disguise felt heavier today. The dirty clothes, the unwashed hair, the makeup that made his skin look weathered and rough. For a moment, he considered giving up and returning to his penthouse apartment. "One more," he told himself, "just one more." A small bell jingled as he pushed open the door. Unlike his other restaurants, this one wasn't trying to be fancy. The tables were simple wood, the floor was slightly scuffed, and the decorations were handmade rather than corporate approved. Yet something about it felt more like his original vision than any other location he'd visited. The breakfast rush was ending, and only a few tables were occupied. A young man at the host stand looked up from wiping menus. "Good morning," he said, making direct eye contact with Robert. No hesitation, no judgment. "Just yourself today?" Robert nodded, surprised by the normal greeting. "Follow me," the host said, leading him not to a back corner or by the bathrooms, but to a perfectly nice table near a window. "Lily will be your server. Can I get you some water while you wait?" "Yes, please," Robert said, still waiting for the treatment to change. The water arrived promptly in a clean glass with a lemon wedge, just like anyone else would receive. Robert looked around, wondering if he'd somehow been recognized despite his disguise. A woman approached his table, notepad in hand. She wore the standard harvest table uniform, but hers was obviously well worn, with tiny stains that wouldn't come out and a small tear in the pocket that had been carefully sewn. Her name tag read Lily. She looked tired, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from working too many hours for too little pay. But her smile was genuine. "Morning," she said, "first time here." Robert nodded. "Well, welcome. Coffee to start." "How much is it?" Robert asked, pulling out his small collection of coins. $2 with free refills, Lily said. "But we're running a special today. First cups on the house." Robert knew there was no such special. He'd designed all the promotions himself, and first cup free had never been one of them. "Really?" he asked. "Really," Lily said with a wink. "I'll be right back with that." The coffee that arrived was steaming hot and fresh, the good stuff, not the bottom of the pot leftovers he'd been served elsewhere. Lily set it down with some cream packets and sugar. "Take your time looking at the menu," she said. "No rush at all." Robert noticed how she limped slightly as she walked away. He wondered what her story was. Did she have another job? Kids to support? Why was she being kind when so many others hadn't been? He nursed his coffee for nearly 30 minutes. Unlike the other locations, Lily checked on him regularly, offering refills without pushing him to order more. When a family at a nearby table glanced his way with obvious discomfort, she casually repositioned herself between their sightline and his table, a supple but effective shield. "Ready to order something to eat?" she asked during her third check-in. "Just more coffee," Robert said. "I don't have much money today." "The soup is good," Lily said, "and it comes with bread. Good deal at $4. Robert counted his visible coins slowly. "I only have $3 and some change left." Lily glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "The soup is on special today too. $3 even." Another special that didn't exist. Robert watched as she wrote down his order and walked to the kitchen. Through the service window, he could see her reaching for her own wallet and adding money to the ticket before handing it to the cook. When the soup arrived, it was hot and fresh, with 2 slices of bread instead of the standard one. A small side of butter came with it, though the menu listed butter as an extra charge. "Enjoy," Lily said. "No rush. We're slow today." They weren't slow. The lunch crowd was beginning to arrive, and Robert could see a small line forming at the door. Yet no one hurried him, and Lily continued to check on him throughout his meal. As he ate, Robert observed how Lily treated everyone else. She was efficient but kind, remembering regulars' names and asking about their families. When she made a small mistake on an order, she apologized sincerely and fixed it immediately. Her limp became more pronounced as the hours passed, but her smile never wavered. For the first time in his undercover journey, Robert felt the knot in his chest loosen. Somewhere in his company, the values he'd started with still lived. They lived in Lily and in this struggling restaurant that financial spreadsheets said wasn't worth keeping open. The afternoon stretched on as Robert remained at his table, nursing his third cup of coffee. The lunch rush had come and gone. Most restaurants would have asked him to leave by now, especially looking the way he did. But no one at this harvest table location had even hinted that he should move along. Outside, dark clouds gathered and rain began to tap against the windows. Robert watched as Lily helped an elderly couple to their car with an umbrella, returning slightly damp but still smiling. Her limp was more noticeable now, and he caught her rubbing her knee when she thought no one was looking. The restaurant had emptied out to just a few tables. A middle-aged man in a business suit kept glancing over at Robert with obvious disapproval. When the man approached the counter to pay his bill, Robert overheard him. "You really should have standards about who you let stay," the man said quietly to the cashier, nodding in Robert's direction. "It's uncomfortable for paying customers." "Sir," Lily said as she stepped in, her voice kind but firm, "everyone who comes through that door is a paying customer. Everyone deserves to be warm and have a meal. The businessman looked embarrassed and left quickly. Lily glanced over at Robert and gave him a small, apologetic smile before continuing her work. Around 4 p.m., the restaurant manager began preparing for the dinner shift. Robert knew he should probably leave, but he wanted to see just how long they would let him stay. The change of staff happened, with new servers clocking in as others left. Lily, however, stayed. Pulling a double? Another server asked her. Bills don't pay themselves, Lily replied with a tired laugh. And Mikey's school shoes aren't going to buy themselves either. Robert wondered who Mikey was, her son perhaps. He watched as she changed her apron and kept working despite having been on her feet for what must have been at least 8 hours already. The dinner crowd began to arrive. Robert's table would normally be needed, but instead of asking him to leave, Lily approached. "Would you like another coffee?" she asked. "It's getting nasty out there." She nodded toward the windows where rain now pounded against the glass. "I don't want to take up space during your busy time," Robert said. "We're okay for now," Lily assured him. "Stay as long as you need to." Robert nodded gratefully. "Another coffee would be nice." "Coming right up," she said, and returned moments later with a fresh cup. As she set it down, Robert's elbow accidentally knocked against the full cup. Hot coffee spilled across the table and onto his lap, soaking his only jacket. He jumped up with a startled cry. "Oh my goodness!" Lily exclaimed, grabbing napkins. "Are you okay? Are you burned?" "I'm fine," Robert said, embarrassed as other customers turned to stare. "I'm so sorry about the mess." Instead of showing irritation, Lily quickly cleaned up the spill. "It happens all the time," she said reassuringly. "Don't worry about it at all." Robert looked down at his soaked jacket, the only outer layer he had in his disguise. "I should go," he said, suddenly feeling genuinely vulnerable in a way he hadn't expected from this experiment. "Wait here," Lily said, disappearing into the back room. She returned moments later with a dark blue sweatshirt with the Harvest Table logo on it. "We have extras," she explained, handing it to him. "You need this more than the company does, especially with that rain." Robert stared at the sweatshirt in disbelief. Employees weren't allowed to give away company merchandise. It was a fireable offense according to the policy he himself had approved years ago. "I can't take this," he protested weakly. "Sure you can," Leonie insisted. "Nobody will miss it. Please, I can't let you go out in that rain with a wet jacket. You'll catch your death." Her genuine concern touched something deep inside Robert. When was the last time anyone had worried about him catching a cold? Even his own assistant's concerns were always about missed meetings, not his well-being. Reluctantly, he accepted the sweatshirt and put it on. It was warm and clean, a stark contrast to his disguise. "Thank you," he said, meaning it more than she could know. As closing time approached, Lily brought him a fresh cup of coffee without him asking. "Last call," she said with a tired smile. "We close in 15 minutes." Robert nodded and reached for his few remaining coins. "I should pay my bill and go." "It's all settled," Lily said. "But I've been here for hours," Robert protested. Lily smiled. "Consider it our rainy day special." As Robert prepared to leave, Lily disappeared again into the kitchen. She returned with a paper bag. "Turkey sandwich and some soup for later," she explained, placing it in his hands. "It'll just get thrown out otherwise." Robert knew that wasn't true. The restaurant had a strict policy against giving away unsold food, another cost-cutting measure he'd implemented company-wide years ago. "How much?" he asked, holding out his handful of change. Lily gently pushed his hand away. "It's covered. Everyone deserves a good meal." As he took the bag, Robert noticed Lily's employee discount card slipped discreetly back into her pocket. She had paid for his meal herself. "Why?" he asked suddenly, needing to understand. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Lily seemed surprised by the question. She thought for a moment before answering. "My mom raised me alone," she said simply. "There were times when we needed help, and sometimes people were kind to us. Sometimes they weren't." She shrugged. "I just try to be the kind one when I can. That's all." As Robert stepped out into the rainy night, warm in his new sweatshirt with food in his hand, he felt something he hadn't expected from this experiment: shame. not at his appearance or how others had treated him, but at what his company had become and what he had let it become. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, everything would change. Lily's phone rang at 6:30 the next morning, jolting her awake. She fumbled for it in the dark, worried it might wake her son in the next room. "Hello," she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Lily Thompson," an unfamiliar woman's voice asked. "Yes, that's me." "This is Jen from Harvest Table Corporate Office. We need you to come in for a meeting today at 10 a.m. Lily sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. The corporate office? Her heart sank. Yesterday she had given away company merchandise and used her employee discount for a customer. Someone must have reported her. "What's this about?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm not at liberty to discuss it over the phone," Jen replied, but her tone softened. "Don't worry about your shift today. It's been covered." That only made Lily more anxious. They had already arranged coverage for her shift. That couldn't be good news. After the call ended, Lily sat on the edge of her bed, her mind racing. She couldn't afford to lose this job. As a single mom with a 10-year-old son, bills to pay, and rent due next week, she needed every hour she could get. She looked at the framed photo of Mikey on her nightstand. "It'll be okay," she whispered, trying to convince herself. 2 hours later, Lily dropped Mikey off at school, promising to pick him up after his basketball practice. She had told him nothing about the meeting. No need to worry him yet. The bus ride to the corporate office took nearly 40 minutes. Lily had never been there before. The glass and steel building looked intimidating against the clear blue sky, nothing like the warm, slightly worn restaurant where she had worked for 3 years. Inside, the lobby was elegant with modern furniture and large potted plants. Lily felt out of place in her best outfit, a simple blouse and slacks that she saved for parent-teacher conferences. "Lily Thompson for a 10 o'clock meeting," she told the receptionist, trying to sound confident. "Yes, they're expecting you," the woman replied with a smile that revealed nothing. 15th floor, suite 1520. The elevator ride felt endless. Lily rehearsed what she would say. Yes, she had given away a company sweatshirt. Yes, she had used her employee discount for a customer. But she would do it again. The man had been soaked, hungry, and treated badly everywhere else. She would rather be fired than treat someone without dignity. The elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, revealing a hallway lined with frosted glass doors. Suite 1520 was at the end. A large corner office with Robert Chen, CEO, on the door. The CEO? Lily's hands started to shake. She had expected a meeting with HR, maybe a regional manager, not the head of the entire company. A woman sitting at a desk outside the office. Jen, presumably, looked up and smiled. "Lily, go right in. Mr. Chen is waiting for you." Lily took a deep breath and opened the door. The office was spacious with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A man stood looking out one of those windows, his back to her. "Please, have a seat," he said without turning around. Lily sat in one of the chairs facing the large desk, her purse clutched tightly on her lap. "Do you know why you're here?" the man asked, still facing the window. "I think so," Lily replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I want you to know that I don't regret what I did. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter what they look like or how much money they have." The man turned, and Lily gasped. Though he wore an expensive suit and his hair was neatly trimmed, she recognized the face immediately. The same man she had served coffee to yesterday, the one she had given the sweatshirt and sandwich to. "You," she exclaimed. Robert Chen smiled and sat down across from her. "Yes, me, though I looked a bit different yesterday. But you're—" Lily's mind struggled to process what was happening. "The CEO, yes," Robert said. "I've been visiting our restaurants undercover for the past week." Lily's face flushed. So it was some kind of test. To catch employees breaking rules. Robert shook his head. "Not at all. It was a test, but not the kind you're thinking." He leaned forward. "I visited 17 restaurants this month. Do you know what I discovered?" Lily shook her head, still too stunned to speak. "I discovered that somewhere along the way, my company lost its soul," Robert said. "The values I started with, treating everyone with dignity, creating a welcoming place for all, were just words on a wall for most locations." He paused. Except yours. I don't understand, Lily said. Our location is struggling. We've been told we might close. According to the spreadsheets, yes, Robert agreed. But spreadsheets don't measure kindness. They don't measure the value of making someone feel human when the rest of the world has treated them as invisible. He opened a folder on his desk. Your manager describes you as hardworking but too soft with certain customers. Says you sometimes bend the rules. He looked up. What he doesn't understand is that your kind of rule bending is exactly what Harvest Table was founded on. So, Lily hesitated. I'm not fired. Robert laughed. Fired? No. Actually, I brought you here to offer you a promotion. A promotion? Lily repeated, feeling like she was in some kind of dream. Your restaurant location isn't closing, Robert said. In fact, I want to use it as a model for getting all our other locations back on track, and I want you to help lead that change. He slid a document across the desk toward her. District Manager for Community Engagement. It's a new position I'm creating. Better hours, much better pay, and you'd be teaching other staff what you already know instinctively, that good business and human kindness aren't opposing forces. They're the same thing. Lily stared at the document, then back at Robert. Why me? Because yesterday you saw a person, not a problem, he said simply. When I spilled that coffee, you didn't see a mess to clean up. You saw someone who needed help. That's rare. And it's exactly what I want Harvest Table to stand for. Tears filled Lily's eyes. For years, she had worked double shifts, coming home with aching feet, wondering if anyone noticed how hard she tried. And now this. What do you say? Robert asked. Lily thought of Mikey, of no more missed school events because of work, of not having to choose between paying the electric bill or buying new shoes. I said yes, she answered, but on one condition. Robert raised an eyebrow. That company's sweatshirt policy needs to change, Lily said with newfound confidence. Sometimes people just need a little warmth. Robert smiled. I think that can be arranged. 6 months passed quickly. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been the struggling Harvest Table restaurant. Now the place was barely recognizable. The faded sign had been replaced, the interior refreshed with warm colors, and most noticeably, a new feature had been added. A large round table near the front window with a small sign that read simply, Community Table. Lily stood by the door, greeting the morning customers. Her new position as District Manager for Community Engagement had changed many things in her life. No more limping through double shifts. No more choosing between paying bills and buying her son new clothes. But some things hadn't changed, like her genuine smile and the way she remembered every regular customer's name. She watched as an elderly man entered and headed straight for the community table. He was one of their regulars now, ever since they'd started the program. Each day, those who couldn't afford a meal could come and sit at this table. Their food was covered by a combination of customer donations, employee contributions, and company funds. Morning, Mr. Wilson, Lily called. Coffee's fresh today. The elderly man waved and settled into his usual spot. Within minutes, a young server had brought him coffee and the daily special without being asked, treating him with the same respect shown to any paying customer. The bell above the door jingled as Robert Chen walked in. Though he still wore a nice suit, something about him had changed too. The hard lines around his eyes had softened. He carried himself differently, less like a man focused only on the next business goal and more like someone who had remembered why he started his company in the first place. How's our pilot location doing today? He asked Lily with a grin. See for yourself, she replied, gesturing to the bustling restaurant. We're having our best morning yet. Robert nodded, taking it all in. What had started as an experiment at one struggling location had now expanded to 10 restaurants across the city, with plans for company-wide implementation by year's end. The community table program was just the beginning. The training team is here, Lally said, leading him to a back room where a group of managers from other locations sat waiting. Robert had once relied on corporate trainers with business degrees to instruct his staff. Now, his best teachers were people like Lally, those who understood that true hospitality couldn't be taught from a manual. Good morning, Robert began, addressing the room. 6 months ago, I thought I knew what was wrong with my company. I thought we just needed better processes, better metrics, better profit margins." He shook his head. I was completely wrong. He told them the story they'd all heard by now, how he had disguised himself as homeless, how he had been treated at his own restaurants, and how one server had changed everything by simply showing kindness. "The numbers don't lie," Robert continued, clicking to display a chart on the screen behind him. "The 10 locations that have implemented our new approach have seen customer satisfaction rise by 42%. More surprisingly, profits are up by 23%. A hand raised in the back. "But doesn't the community table program cost money? Giving away free meals can't be profitable." Robert smiled. "That's what my financial team said too. But here's what we discovered. For every meal we give away, we gain loyal customers who come back again and again. People want to support businesses that care about more than just profit." As the training continued, Lily slipped out to check on the main restaurant. The morning rush was in full swing. At one table, a businessman in an expensive suit sat beside a construction worker in dusty clothes. At another, a group of college students shared space with an elderly couple. The community table was full, not just with those receiving free meals, but with paying customers who had specifically asked to sit there to be part of the program. By the register, a glass jar labeled Community Fund overflowed with bills and coins. They had to empty it twice a day now. Lily's phone buzzed with a text message from her son. "Got an A on my science project. Can't wait to tell you about it." She smiled, remembering how she used to miss these moments when working double shifts. Now she would be there when he got home from school. The kitchen doors swung open as Andy, their head chef, emerged with a tray of freshly baked muffins. He had once been homeless himself, living in his car after losing his previous job. Now he ran the kitchen and had developed a training program for others looking for a second chance. "Special delivery for the community table," he announced with pride, arranging the muffins beautifully on the table. At the end of the training session, Robert gathered everyone in the main restaurant. Staff members, customers, and trainees all listened as he made an announcement. "Today marks 6 months since we began our transformation," he said. "What started with one person's kindness has grown into something none of us could have imagined. Beginning next month, every Harvest Table employee will share in our success through our new profit-sharing program." Applause erupted throughout the restaurant. For years, industry experts had told Robert that restaurants couldn't afford to pay workers more or offer benefits. Yet here they were, proving that treating people well, both customers and employees, was not just the right thing to do but also good business. As the celebration continued, Robert found a quiet moment with Lily near the community table. "I've been thinking," he said. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't given me that sweatshirt and sandwich." Lily laughed. "I almost didn't. I was so afraid of losing my job." "Instead, you changed an entire company," Robert replied. "One act of kindness rippled out further than you could have imagined." They watched as Mr. Wilson, the elderly regular, helped a young mother settle her children at a nearby table, entertaining the toddler while she got situated with her baby. "That's the real transformation," Lily observed. "It's not just about the company. It's about creating spaces where people remember how to see each other again, not as customers or employees or homeless or wealthy, but as human beings who all deserve dignity." Robert nodded, remembering how it felt to be invisible in his own restaurants. "A lesson I won't forget," he promised. Outside the window, the new sign gleamed in the sunlight. Underneath the Harvest Table name, a new tagline had been added: "Where kindness is always on the menu."